Good evening, sports fans, and welcome to Curious Formula. I'm your moderator and your host, Curious Formula. Thanks for rocking with me at Curious Formula Live. We go live every Wednesday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you're rocking with your boy. Please make sure you subscribe, like, and comment below. Hit the notification bell. Let you know when I go live every week. We go live every week at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you're in the right place at the right time. Thank you for rocking with your boy. Remember, think it ain't illegal yet. So we're going to start this off by talking about today's and this past week's events of notoriety. 5 reasons why Donald Trump and Kamala Harris can still win the election. And if you haven't seen it before, Donald Trump has been on the stump. He's literally been on the stump since the convention, and even before then, he took a few days off, but it really wasn't that much of a break. He really got back on the horse during the convention and continued to stay on the horse during the convention. And so we're going to play a little bit about him and what he's been saying on the stump, and we will go from there. So thank you all for rocking with me. We're doing some technical things here to make sure you guys can see and hear. Let me know if you are in the chat, and let me know if you can hear me. Want to make sure that we are coming across live and direct here, and that all of our bells and whistles are done and all of our things are working for our good here. So let me just make sure. And I do see that we are live, and that is a good thing. And so we will go from here. All right, folks. So Donald Trump, 5 reasons why Donald Trump can still win this election. Let's listen to a little bit of Donald Trump this past week.
We're uniting forces to end the endless foreign wars, stop the censorship, end weaponization of our government, defend our borders, rebuild our middle class, protect the health of our children, and above all, to restore our republic and vanquish the corruption that's all over Washington, D.C. right now. 3 days ago, I was honored to receive the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. We're very proud. Thank you.
So that's Donald Trump talking at the National Guard Association, talking about RFK Jr.'s endorsement and how his campaign is doing well. Numbers don't show that with polling, but Donald Trump can still win this election. And there's a lot of reasons why he can still win. First reason why, number one of the 5 reasons, is with 70 days left and after unprecedented Harris surge in the polls, the race is still virtually tied. And so, there's a lot of people out there who are talking about Harris surging and her being 4 points up, 5 points up, all those kinds of things. That is all true. And my disclaimer is that, she's trending, even going higher in the polls as we go forward. So this race could widen even more. But the electorate is so balkanized, so much so set in terms of being Trump or being Biden and now Harris. There's not much room and not much more that Harris can actually grow. And so the reality is that while Harris is surging and can probably surge more, we're still basically tied. The margin that she is up is 4. I saw something as high as 5%. When you talk about the margin of error being between 3.5% and 4.5%, that's a half percentage, maybe 1% above that average, that margin. And that's a virtually tied race nationally. And the same thing is true in battleground states where we've seen some traction going forward for, the vice president, but again, not pulling away. And I'm not sure you're ever going to see a pulling away. So as long as Donald Trump can stay close, can stay tied, it's a winnable race for Donald Trump and the GOP. Second reason why Donald Trump can still win this election is he still has 1 to 2 debates left. And those of you who have seen Donald Trump debate, I know it's been comical at times. It's been weird at times to coin a new fashionable Democratic word. It's been a little odd at times. But one thing you need to know about Donald Trump in debates, he doesn't lose debates. If you look at 2016, the movement walking around Hillary Clinton, just trying to unnerve her, just trying to make her feel uncomfortable, not answering questions. If you watch the first debate, as you watch my content here, the first debate that Donald Trump had with Joe Biden, really the story of that debate got sort of washed away by the headline that was Joe Biden performing so poorly. But when you look at sort of how Donald Trump performed, well, one thing becomes really clear. Donald Trump didn't answer any questions during that entire period. Not one question did Donald Trump answer. And we were live on TikTok on my other channel, Curious_Formula. Please go there, subscribe, like, and comment as well. We had a number of Trump supporters there who were, yelling Trump 2024 and Donald Trump, we love him, and Biden's not doing this. And I kept saying, stop sort of, putting bumper stickers, slogans, and sayings out here on the live. Listen to the answers. My question to you, Trump supporters, this was during the first debate, is Donald Trump answering any questions? And we counted, me and Donald Trump supporters who were on the live. And as we went through and listened, Donald Trump didn't answer one question. And that came from Trump supporters who admit the same thing. And so Donald Trump still does not lose debates without answering. What he will do is he will use it as he needs to. So he will answer the questions that he wants to answer in the way that he wants to answer them. If he doesn't want to answer questions, he won't answer those questions. And as a former elected official, when we're in political debates, if we can, the first thing we're trained to do when we prepare for debates is that when the moderator poses a question or a panel poses a question, we take that question and we answer it the way we want to answer it. We put forth the ideas and the policies and our positions and ideology and our vision and our attacks on the other person in the middle of that question. Because what is the moderator or the panel going to say? You didn't answer my question? Okay, pose it again. You pose it again, I'm going to answer it the same way I want to. So he will do that, or Donald Trump will create chaos. He'll do what he did 4 years ago in speaking over Joe Biden. I know we're talking about the debate rules in terms of mics being turned off and the like, but Donald Trump, if the debate is not going the way he wants to, if he feels like he's being, called out of his name, if he's being pressed to answer something he doesn't want to answer, he will set that place on fire and he will cause chaos and he will speak over another candidate. You remember Joe Biden so famously said, "Will you just shut up, man?" Right? This is what Donald Trump will do. And Harris can make the faux pas, right? If Vice President makes a mistake, a fact, or shows weakness or shows an inconsistency, Donald Trump can jump on it, and a poor performance in the debate can create an opening for him again to win this race and get ahead again and pick up his mojo. Romney won the first debate against Barack Obama, a much better debater, in their first debate in 2012. And for a while, Obama was leading that race, and it got very tight right afterwards. It's a pathway for Donald Trump to not only seize the momentum again, this will be on September 10th when this next debate is, but also allow him to maybe take the lead, stop the bleeding, and start moving forward. And then we have the second debate, which may happen, but we know there will also be a vice presidential debate. And even though Tim Walz, I think, has been knocking the ball out of the park, and J.D. Vance has had some trouble getting some traction, even amongst Republicans, it does set up an opportunity for J.D. Vance to kind of get himself back online. And Tim Walz, who is a great speaker, great performer on that stage, who may not be as intimately knowledgeable about the Harris record or the plan, this could be problematic for him. So another opening, another opportunity for the Trump Vance ticket, and another way that he can potentially set himself up to win the election in November. The third reason that I think Donald Trump can still win this election despite where the polls are is that there's still issues that can turn in this election. There could be an October surprise. Don't forget the ceasefire pursuit of the Biden administration that they're trying to do. There's not seemingly getting any closer to happening, even though that there is a proposal that the United States has put forward that apparently Hamas is supportive. There's no real indication that Israel is going to support it. There could be a dip in the economy, even though things are humming right now. Inflation is now at 2020 levels and dropping, and the Feds have said they're going to drop interest rates next month. So we're starting to see the loosening of that. The economy is still on a precarious position because of post-COVID, the way all the industrialized nations of the world are sitting upon an economy that could go left or go right, even though it seems that America is leading the way. But that could be another October surprise that could again get Donald Trump back in this race, get him his mojo again, hit one of his talking points that is actually resonating with American voters, and then it could put him back in the lead again. The fourth reason why I think Donald Trump can still win this election, is because Donald Trump's vote is a solid 44 to 46% of the total electorate vote. I call it the grievance America vote, right? It will always keep him in striking distance of the lead, will always keep him in striking distance of winning this race because it is a solid 44 to 46%. Now, we all talk about how does Donald Trump get to 50%, right? Donald Trump has never won the popular vote. And even in winning the electoral vote against Hillary Clinton, he lost the popular vote. We know he lost the popular vote in 2020, and he's on par. He's on track to lose it again. But his hardcore MAGA and those who will affiliate with the MAGA hardcore coalition that is Donald Trump is at about 44% nationally. But I don't know if it goes above that, but it will remain that. And as long as he keeps those numbers, he's been striking distance. If he's only 4 to 5 percentage points away from getting 50%, particularly in the battleground states, he still has a chance at this. Again, that 44 to 46% of his coalition base, I call them grievance America. They're no compromise, right? They're never going to vote for a Democrat. They were never going to vote for RFK Jr. They're certainly never going to vote for Harris. They're always going to stay with Donald Trump. Hell, they might not even vote for another Republican. They're only going to be part of Donald Trump's coalition. They're only going to be part of the cult of personality. And I call it the others outside of the rim of the cult of personality. And as long as they stay strong, they stay solid, he has a shot. That 44 to 46% is going to get more ferocious as we get closer to election day, and they're going to dig in their heels more. And that could be problematic for the Democrats. It could be threatening to some other folks who want to join the Harris coalition. But if they remain solid, and they become more ferocious and more indignant, look to them to increase their vote totals in terms of the GOTV effort by the Republicans, and again, move this election towards Donald Trump. The fifth reason why Donald Trump can still win this election is the post-election provides injunctive and legal relief opportunities for Donald Trump. Something that the media is not telling you a lot about, but we're going to talk a lot more about this as we get closer to the end of the race, is that there have been a lot of changes in a lot of purple and red states. I know red states have made a lot, but people have not been looking at the purple states where there have been changes in vote certification, particularly at the federal level. There's been a lot of laws changed, a lot of statutes changed in some states that will decide this election that are part of the 6 or 7 battleground states where this thing is very tight. And what do I mean by those states? I mean states like Michigan. I mean states like Georgia. I mean states like Wisconsin. A little less on Wisconsin, and a little less in Pennsylvania, but states in Arizona. There have been a lot of new laws, new statutes, new regulations, some new guidance about certification of votes. There have been Republican state legislators that have changed laws in terms of how electors are selected and who can protest. The other thing I'll tell you, so there will be lots of lawsuits if Donald Trump does not come out the victor on November 5th. I've often said in this content here that if he is not the winner on November 5th, then look for him to try to be the winner on November 6th and try to find a way legally and through some street things as well. As I've mentioned before, there will be parades and there will be marches and there will be a lot of other things out there trying to cause confusion. And what's indicative about that is that the Harris campaign, I'll talk about that when I talk about the 5 ways I think she can win, But when you look at the Harris campaign in terms of the amount of volunteers and the amount of GOTV army she's putting together, Donald Trump and the GOP are not putting together the same army. Where they're putting volunteers and paid folks on or on these things called voter integrity teams, voter integrity groups. These are groups they're going to put out in blue areas, in purple areas, in areas that have high concentrations of voters that are part of the Democratic base and independent areas. And they're going to be looking at how people vote. They're going to be questioning people's ability to vote. They're going to be questioning people's legal right to vote. We've had this thing, has an example of this, in New Jersey in the 80s when Christine Todd Whitman, who's interestingly enough an anti-Trump former governor of New Jersey, when she was in her race, her campaign manager at the time bragged about how he paid off ministers, and it was proven not to be true, but that he was making sure that vote suppression was happening in the cities and that they had integrity officers out there in black communities and in urban communities, making sure people could vote, asking for IDs. And that made some people turn away from the polls. And he kept saying that that was the margin of victory for her in these states. Now, she, of course, repudiated it. The guy lied, said, I lied. I was bragging, what have you. But there's a recording of him saying that. Look for those kinds of roots in the 80s and 90s to bear fruit in this year's election in ways that we've heretofore not talked about. Okay, so that's the Donald Trump way. Now, there's some other ways that I think that Kamala Harris can still win this election. As you all know, she became the presumptive nominee, and there are ways now that I think she will be able to win this election. There are 5 reasons I think Kamala Harris can win the nomination. And let's talk a little bit about them. But first, let's hear her during her acceptance speech at the Democrat National Convention last week in Chicago.
And America, we must also be steadfast in advancing our security and values abroad. As Vice President, I have confronted threats to our security, negotiated with foreign leaders, strengthened our alliances, and engaged with our brave troops overseas. As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. And I will fulfill our sacred obligation to care for our troops and their families, and I will always honor and never disparage their service and their sacrifice.
Okay, so that's Kamala Harris at her acceptance speech. So what are the 5 reasons why I think Kamala Harris can win this election? Well, the first thing is that there are more pathways for her to grow her coalition to 50%. Folks, one of the things that was interesting as you've seen her grow is that there's still more room for her to grow. As I've mentioned before, the hardest part about Donald Trump's problem is that it's finding a pathway to grow from 44, 45, 46% to the 50%, not just nationwide, but particularly in battleground states. She has more pathways. Why? Because she has flipped the Latino vote numbers that Biden was posting on its head, literally erasing a negative that people thought at one time Donald Trump may actually win the Latino vote. She has now turned that on its head and now leading by 13, 14 percentage points. She still needs to get more, and she can still actually grow more. That's why you're seeing, I think, about $50 million buy that the Harris campaign is making specifically to target Hispanic districts, Latino districts across the country. Shout out to David Plouffe. I know David Plouffe is the one behind all this because he's the king of targeting, as I told everybody from the Obama camp who remember him in our campaigns. He's the targeting master. If there are votes to be had for the ticket, he will find them and he will mine them and he will get them out to the polls. There's nobody better in the nation and in the history of American politics. Read his book. I have a signed copy of it. So Latinos, he still has room to grow. The Republicans, it was interesting that the Republicans for Harris were on full display during the convention. Why? Because they're still pulling. And I told you all this 6 months ago, if you follow my content, that there was going to be a concerted, well-funded Republican effort to reach out to swing district Republicans, purple district Republicans, and independents who were suburban white and well-educated, middle-aged and younger. And it wouldn't be Democrats or the Democratic Party or even the ticket reaching out to them. It'd be Republicans reaching out to other Republicans. And so you're going to see that there's room for her to grow. That 15% of Ronald Reagan mainstream conservative Republicans who are looking for a home, who feel like MAGA has taken over their party, and that this is now the party of Donald Trump, pursuant to what Donald Trump Jr. said. That 15% of hardcore Ronald Reagan conservative mainstream Republicans and conservatives are looking for a home. She has room to grow there. I hope she will do it with policy, but we'll talk about that later. And independence, as I told you all again, if you follow my content, Donald Trump cannot win in November unless he wins independents. He won them in 2016 in a narrow victory over Hillary Clinton. He has not won them since. He has to win independents in November if he has a chance of winning. And so she has a place to grow in those numbers there, and that can deny the win for Donald Trump. Turnout, she has, again, to grow that. Her mountain that she has to climb is she has to get turnout in 2024 the way Democratic turnout was in 2020. She has room to grow there. And she just has a better ground game and GOTV effort than the Republicans do. As I mentioned, she has hundreds of thousands of new workers that they are plugging in to work these states, particularly these battleground states. And the Republicans are hiring these voter integrity people, right? Not to wage the fight and the war to win the votes on election day, but to contest the votes that have already been registered on November 6th and thereafter before Inauguration Day. It's almost a relitigation of 2020 all over again. So that's the advantages she has. The second reason why Kamala Harris can still win this election is that she has more resources at this point. $540 million raised since she was named the presumptive nominee, and an incredible week. I think she raised $40 million during the hour that she spoke when she became when she accepted the nomination of the Democratic Party. And now we understand there are reports coming that Silicon Valley billionaire types and millionaires are now starting to contribute to her campaign, recognizing she may win and then trying to get in with the winner, essentially. So expect that largesse, that war chest to grow. Third reason why I think Kamala Harris can still win this race is Trump and the GOP just refuse to build a big tent and expand their coalition. If you look at the red meat MAGA rhetoric that Donald Trump continues to espouse on the campaign trail, that J.D. Vance continues to espouse on the campaign trail, that you don't see a lot of congressional Republicans telling Donald Trump to do and telling him to pull away from, he can't help himself. He's doubling down on that rhetoric. He's doubling down on the base, and his base is not growing. It's easy to see why, because when you talked about the RFK Jr. endorsement, which we'll talk about later, it had no effect on his polling. In fact, the bounce that Kamala Harris received from the convention and the goodwill there was a bigger bounce for her than the bounce that Donald Trump got from RFK Jr.'s endorsement. Why? Part of it has to do with RFK Jr. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But another reason is because there is no outreach from the campaign to the folks that Nikki Haley begged Donald Trump to reach out to, that Vivek Ramaswamy begged Trump to reach out to, that Lindsey Graham begged Donald Trump to reach out to. He's not doing it. The campaign has not done it. You don't see any messaging or any policy breakdown that is actually making outreach to the people he has to make outreach to win. Like I said, the independents. If Donald Trump does not win independents, he does not win this race, and that's another reason why that you have to give the edge to Kamala Harris in these last couple of weeks. The fourth reason why Kamala Harris can win this race is the chance for a successful balancing of the Biden record and the Harris platform. Vice President Harris has an opportunity in these next weeks, particularly with this first interview she's going to have with a nationally syndicated somebody, right, to really lay out a vision and a plan that picks up where Biden left off and talks about how she can expand on the good things that he did and make them bigger and wider and affecting positively more Americans. But she has an opportunity to lay out her own vision, her own mission, her own set of values and ideas and specificity that can actually grow her coalition even more so. It's going to be interesting to see if she tacks to the middle and really goes after those policies of independence in middle America and those Ronald Reagan conservative mainstream Republicans are asking her to do to make them feel more comfortable to come into this coalition, this big tent. She has an opportunity to do it. Again, more pathways, more opportunities to grow the big tent that she has. And the last thing, the fifth reason why I think Kamala Harris can still win this election is it's the brevity of the campaign itself. You know, there's no time for attacks to really stick. Either way, people's opinions are pretty formulated, are pretty calcified at this point, and I don't see all the things that the Republicans threw against the wall to try and knock her off her pedestal are just not working. And with 70 days left, which is soon turning into 60 days, right? Is there enough time to really do attacks? Likewise, this, the same truncated timeline, same truncated campaign structure or time frame is also allowing Kamala Harris not to have to get a big agenda, have too many specifics. We're in unprecedented times for both sides. And I don't think this is going to be an easy race for any side, pro, con, pro, to navigate with such short time, because early voting is literally starting in the next 2 weeks in Pennsylvania. Early voting is already starting. So a lot of this is going to be ground game. It's going to be voter contact, voter identification, voter persuasion, and then getting folks to go out to the polls. And so there won't be a lot of time for attacks. There won't be necessarily even a requirement for a big specific agenda to come forward for Kamala Harris. And for the Trump people who say, well, that needs to happen. Well, Donald Trump has been very less than specific for the last few weeks, because I think his campaign understands that too. That this is not going to be based on issues. It's really going to be based on ideology. It's really going to be based on who sees what, who sees which candidate as a threat to democracy or a threat to their way of life. And I think people are going to make big decisions based on those big issues. That's the way I see it. But tell me what you think as well. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about our good friend, Mr. RFK Jr. So, unless your head has been buried under a pound of sand, you now recognize that our good friend RFK Jr. has left the race. And I'm interested in what you think about this. What does RFK Jr. dropping out and endorsing Trump mean for the 2024 election? Let's listen to a little bit about from him when he dropped out of the race this past week.
16 months ago, in April of 2023, I launched my campaign for President of the United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment.
So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. goes on to declare how the Democratic Party has dropped the banner, is no longer that party. He even said, in his endorsement of Donald Trump, he called the Democratic Party out for actively working against him, and said that but for that, he would have won the nomination like his uncle and like his father was on the way to doing in 1968. And to that, and to what does it mean, what does it mean to the 2024 election now that he's dropped out? I say nothing could be further from the truth, and that nothing will happen as a result of him dropping out. First of all, so why do I say that? I say that for a couple of reasons. One is, head to head in the Democratic primary, RFK Jr. never polled well against Joe Biden, and when he was the only candidate that was actively pursuing the nomination against him. He never polled well, because for a lot of people, he's not just a conservative, moderate Democrat. He is a I don't want to say fascist Democrat. And that's not my opinion about him. I happen to think, as a disclaimer, that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has an incredible policy about housing. If you don't believe it, go to his site. about small business development, and about public education. A lot of ideas that I support about public education, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. actually supported, and in ways that I thought were refreshing to the body politic and to the debate happening at the federal level. But he never polled well against Biden. And then part of the reason why he dropped out of the Democratic Party nomination, it wasn't just because the party machinery was against him and working against him. They work against anybody who challenges a sitting president. The machinery worked against Ted Kennedy, his uncle as well, who ran against Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination in 1980. And so this is not anything new to RFK Jr. He knows the rules. He knows that, you can't cry over spilled milk. You fight, or you choose not to, or you go the third way. So he chose to go the third way. But also from the beginning, his campaign was plagued by missteps and mistakes, and he was spending money like water. I mean, remember when former Congressman Dennis Kucinich was running his campaign, and then he announced his campaign. He was leaving the Democratic Party nomination and running as an independent, and then Dennis Kucinich quit or was fired, and we never really got the story about that. And then when it was time to pick a VP candidate, he picked someone that no one knew about, this woman named Shanahan as his VP candidate. And then, we didn't really realize where she stood on issues or anything. It just found out that she was rich, and she was able to basically pour tons of her own personal money into the campaign. And so, those are weird things. I remember reading things on RFK Jr.'s site saying, from his own supporters saying, why would you pick her? And so his big numbers of 20% nationally and 25% and leading 18 to 24-year-olds started dissipating, not because of Democratic machine intervention or Republicans intervening in his race. By the way, Republicans were also working to make sure that that RFK Jr. didn't make the ballots as an independent either, and they were constantly criticizing him. Just 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump and his GOP supporters called him a communist, but I digress. But everyone was making it difficult for him because that's what people do with third party people. But as he kept going on, his numbers kept dwindling down, and it had nothing to do with it had something to do with Democratic interference. I'll give him that, and Republican interference, but a lot of it had to do with the poor running of his campaign and some of the crazy decisions that people second guessed about his own decision making and the decision making of people close around him about what kind of president would you be if you can't run a decent campaign. The other thing I'll say is this: is that third party candidates in America in 2024 just can't win. Because I told RFK Jr. supporters this many weeks ago right here on my content. I told them, when they would say, what about RFK Jr.? I would say the same thing that I'm saying today. I would say he's got a lot of really good ideas. Some crazy ones, but he's got a lot of real good ideas that should at least be debated in the public forum that is the federal elections for president, right? These are issues that most of the two-party candidates never talk about and certainly weren't talking about in this cycle. And I thought that he deserved to be on the debate stage. I signed a petition to make sure RFK Jr. should get on the debate stage because I felt he would have brought issues and concerns to America to think about that neither party would really want to address or had ever really thought about in a constructive way. But the problem with running as a third party candidate, as I tell those RFK Jr. supporters, was that you spend most of your year and your money and your time trying to get on ballots and then going to the courts on appeal to fight to get injunctive relief, to win appeals when people try to challenge your petitions. And it's time consuming, it's expensive to get on the ballot in all 50 states if you're not already associated with a third party that has access to a ballot in all 50 states, like the Green Party, for instance, or the Libertarian Party. And by the time you actually win, all the debate, all the money, all the petition challenges, all the court challenges, it's usually like August or September. That leaves you about 2 months to actually campaign. Don't take my word for it. Ask Ross Perot. Ross Perot is our best example. In 1992, Ross Perot, a self-described billionaire, runs for a third-party candidacy, creates his own party and the Reform Party, fights all the way to get, had the money to do it, to get on the ballot in 50 states. By the time he finally got on all the ballots in all the 50 states, it was September. He had a month and a half to campaign, if that, for the presidency. He had spent goo globs of money, not on his message, not on commercials, not on trying to force his way into debates. He had spent it on trying to get on the ballot. He didn't win one state for all that effort. Long gone are the days when people like George Wallace and Strom Thurmond, segregationists who ran third-party candidacies and actually won states when these rules and laws were very simple. Those days are long gone, and RFK Jr. unfortunately is somebody who bears the brunt of those laws changing. If he was really serious about changing the system, then he would actually be about the next 4 years, not endorsing Donald Trump. He'd be about changing state laws about how to get people on third-party candidates on the ballot in those particular states. The other thing I'll say is that his comments about winning the nomination, like his uncle, is a fantasy that was never even true. And this is the problem with listening to people like RFK Jr. who give you revisionist history. Folks, there was no process of delegates getting a certain number of delegates to win the nomination when his uncle ran for the presidency in 1960. There was no set number of delegates one had to earn or could earn to win the nomination when his father ran in 1968. Before 1976, the Democratic Party and Republican Party used primaries and caucuses as a beauty pageant. In fact, that's what they called them, right? It was a way for candidates who were interested in running for president to meet the electorate, shake hands, and win some votes, maybe win the contest against candidates who had not even announced or were planning to announce, to show that you had some electoral ability, that you had some ability to get votes outside of maybe your state. If you were a senator or a governor, that you could go to Iowa, you could go to some other state, and you could win votes. John Kennedy only participated in a handful of caucuses and primaries when he ran to show electability to the bosses that eventually picked him. Well, that and his daddy's wealth, right, which also was a thumb on the scale of who should be the nominee in 1960. But beyond the romantic looking back at his father's, race in 1968, most historians will readily tell you that it was doubtful Bobby Kennedy would have received the nomination in 1968 because the bosses did not want him. And LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, was an avowed enemy of Bobby Kennedy. And even though he was no longer the president, he was still the sitting president. He hated him. And so Hubert Humphrey, vice president to Lyndon Baines Johnson, a stalwart of the Democratic Party, was always going to be the favorite to get the nomination at that time. The first time delegates selected the nominee for president was in 1976. And that was based on changes to the selection system that was instituted by George McGovern in 1972 at the Democratic National Convention that year, to open up the process, to decentralize the decision-making process about who was going to be the nominee. Interestingly enough, Bill and Hillary Clinton were part of that campaign in 1972 to change that system. And Jimmy Carter used that system to go from a candidate who was a former governor of Georgia who nobody knew to win that nomination. He used the party new regulations against the party regulars, against the party elites, and pulled up the upset of upsets. The other reason why I think RFK Jr., his dropping out is not going to have an effect is because he tried to cut the same deal with Harris first that he cut with Donald Trump, and she refused to even meet with him. He's only 5% of the U.S. vote right now, and looking for quid pro quo. This is not the way to negotiate, especially when you just want to punish the Democratic Party because you feel hurt that they didn't take your candidacy seriously. Initial polling post-withdrawal show that, again, as I said earlier, Harris got a bigger bounce from the DNC, having more of an effect on her polling than his endorsement of Trump. Harris moved to a 4-point lead nationwide and leads in 6 of 7 battleground states in a 2-person race, and they factored in the RFK Jr. An endorsement. Last thing I'll say is that many of his supporters, 40% or so, hate Trump too. So there will be no one-to-one, addition to Trump's numbers. And I love when the Trump supporters were saying, well, we got RFK Jr. supporters. No, you don't. Part of what made his campaign somewhat worthwhile was that he told his own supporters to think for yourselves. And a little less than half are not going to support Donald Trump. They're either not going to vote or they're going to support the Democratic nominee. In the end of this, RFK Jr. is a useful tool for the GOP and a propaganda piece. 2 weeks ago, they all called him a communist, including the press secretary for Donald Trump. And even in RFK Jr.'s speech endorsing Trump, he said, you know, Donald Trump basically, I'm paraphrasing, lied to me about my issues 4 years ago. My hope is that we'll work together now and he will be a man of his word. Good luck with that. He'll dismiss you like he dismisses everybody else, because the things that RFK Jr. is talking about in terms of food and medicine and those kind of things, none of that is part of Trump 47. None of that is part of Project 2025. And there is no audience within the Trump orbit to pass and support any of that stuff. And everything that they're doing for him right now is to try to get points to win this election. And if Trump did win this election or does win this election, RFK Jr. may get a post somewhere in the administration. But Donald Trump does not listen to the secretaries of various departments in Washington. And in fact, if he follows Project 2025, he will eliminate a lot of those departments and those agencies, because he doesn't see the need for them, and neither do the people that support him and support his agenda going forward. But again, tell me what you think, in the comments here. I'd love to hear about them. All right, moving on. So I think there are 4 things that I think we learned from the DNC that just passed. And we're going to quickly go into those things. But first, let's hear some of the highlights from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago.
Let me know in my heart when my days are through, America, America, I gave my best to you.
The only personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
The first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions.
Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
This weird obsession with crowd sizes.
DNC, turn out for what?
Together, let's all choose Kamala Harris.
Okay, so you get a feel for what happened to DNC. Here are 4 things I think we honestly learned from the DNC. I think America does not want to vote for Donald Trump. As I've been saying in my content here for a long time, I've been saying it loudly and clearly. Polling for the last 2 years has shown both campaigns, both parties, the simple fact that America, overwhelmingly, 3/4 of the electorate did not want a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They did not want to vote for them. For 2 years, we've known this. And the fact of the matter is that one of the two candidates that America said they did not want is no longer in the race. But you know what that means? It means that we have one candidate in the race that America has said for the last 2 years they do not want to be president. They do not want to vote for. That is where we're at right now. And it's just interesting to me to hear Donald Trump supporters thinking that, like, you only heard one part of this equation, that America didn't want Joe Biden. No, they don't want Donald Trump. And so what has been clear is that I'm not sure if you put Sylvester the Cat in as the new nominee, that he might not be leading Donald Trump. But what came clear by the bump that has happened since she was named as a presumptive nominee and what's been calcified in the DNC that happened last week is that America does not want to vote for Donald Trump if they have an alternative that they like more, that they think can win, and that they think can govern. Now, it still remains to be seen if Kamala Harris can pass those 3 tests, but she's off to a good start. And the DNC is one of the reasons why we now know this fact. The second thing I think we learned from the DNC is that America does want to vote for Kamala Harris with conditions. They want to know more. They want the opportunity for her, and there is an opportunity for her, to pivot to the right more and separate from Biden, as we talked about a little earlier. They want to know more about not only her character and what she's actually done as district attorney, as attorney general, as senator, as vice president. I think there's a lot of room to equate her with that, but she also has an opportunity to pivot and talk about some of her own issues. And she started to do some of that at the convention. She talked about the middle class tax cut that she wants to get. She talked about when people say we haven't done anything at the border, she says, well, my border plan is the bipartisan Senate border plan that Donald Trump put his finger on and stopped from moving, which was the most expansive border plan and the most conservative Republican-friendly border plan that has been brought up in any House of Congress in the last 30 years. She did talk about reinforcing and reinvigorating NATO and siding with our allies more. She talked about anti-price gouging initiatives. She talked about an opportunity economy, talking about the economy in a way that Joe Biden had not talked about. But there's an opportunity for her to do more, and I think people want to learn more about that. Certainly, the Republicans out there, the Republicans for Harris is a real thing, and there is a desire from that group of voters in America to learn more, to get more offerings of please come over to our side that needs to happen. And we learned that by watching, again, the nightly takes of what happened to DNC, and the simple fact that more people watched the convention by far than watched the RNC a month or so ago at this point. The third thing I think we learned from watching the DNC 2024 in Chicago, that the Democrats stole the GOP convention playbook. Now, I don't know where the Republican playbook was, but that was a boring snooze fest. The Democrats took the GOP convention playbook from 1980 Ronald Reagan. That was vintage Reagan convention. I mean, the USA chants, the flags everywhere, right? The calls to freedom and redefining what freedom actually means. Again, the Republicans even showcased at the DNC. That was a Ronald Reagan tactic. When Ronald Reagan was running in 1980 and in 1984 for re-elections, particularly in 1984, he used to bring Democrats to the RNC, saying, I used to be a Democrat. Now I can't vote for the party of liberals and whatnot. That's what the Democrats did this past time. So the Democrats stole the GOP convention playbook outright, theft, and they were successful. If you look at the ratings and you look at the bump that she got from the convention, Donald Trump did not get any bump from the RNC convention, and Kamala Harris got all the bumps. The fourth thing I think we learned from the DNC, and the last thing, is that there was unprecedented access to young social media content creators. Literally, what I had seen before the DNC was a lot, and I mean a plethora of anti-Harris, anti-Democrat content creators. You know I'm a content creator, so I see it all, that were out there in all shades of color, Black, Latinos, and whatnot. What I saw post-convention was I saw a lot more Harris, Democrat supportive content creators out there that were younger, that have been putting platforms out on TikTok and on YouTube and a lot of other spaces, and they are actively pushing back against MAGA in a way that I think, again, did not exist pre-DNC. They made a concerted effort to open their doors to content creation. Boy, it was just too late, and I haven't quite got a big enough audience yet to kind of rock like that, but they were there, and they've been carrying this message forward in the last few days that I've seen since the convention. And I think those are all good things for the campaign going forward. And I think those are things that, we can look at as progress that was made from a convention. And that's what conventions are actually supposed to do when they're run right and when they're run correctly. But again, tell me what you think. Last thing we're going to talk about is examples of the less hypocrisy.
Calm down, fellas.
And I don't know if you can see or hear this, but I hope you can. I want to start this over again.
I'm upset that Brittany Griner is out
Okay.
here calling herself Pops.
Hold on here. Hold on. Okay. So, as I told you here, we were equal opportunity offenders, equal opportunity supporters, and we will be saying some things that Republicans are going to get mad at. We're going to be saying some things that Democrats are going to be mad at. So I'm sure throughout this whole broadcast here, there were a lot of things that maybe some Republicans didn't like. Well, now it's time for me to offend my fellow Democrats. A lot of hypocrisy going on the left. The Republicans are not all crazy. And I can't think of a better case that I just saw in this video, the case of Brittany Griner, as put out by Ryan Davis. If you don't know who Ryan Davis is one of the funniest guys out here doing it. Please follow his content on TikTok. Follow his content. This is from TikTok that I'm about to show you, and follow his content on YouTube. And you can watch him. He just has comedy that makes you think. I mean, he in the same vein as a Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock. He is cut from that cloth, and I think he became that kind of a big time comic, not from hitting the road as many people do, but from actually doing YouTube videos and being sort of a content creator. But he talked about Brittany Griner and sort of the double standard that the media, primarily liberal media, have about Brittany Griner saying that she's going to be Father of the Year. And we're going to talk about it a little bit piece by piece here, but let's just take a listen, and I'll stop it when I need to.
Calm down, fellas. I get it. You know, how you gonna be a father and you play for the WNBA? That don't make sense. I get it. I saw all the posts about it. But you guys are looking at it the wrong way. Actually, I believe Brittany Griner is going to be one of the greatest fathers of all time. See, me as a father, I understand there's a lot of things that Brittany Griner has been through that I won't be able to explain to my son, even living as a man, as she can explain it as a woman who is masculine presenting or has the male aesthetic, and how society treats men versus how society treats women, even if you look like a man. And that looking like a man still doesn't make you a man. I'll give you an example. Let's say when it comes to domestic violence, right? Like Brittany Griner knows that if she beats up her partner, her and her partner both go to jail and get a mug shot, and she can go on to have this illustrious career even after that, and doesn't have to wear the tag of abuser for the rest of her career and have.
Now, this is point one. So Ryan Davies makes a good point. Brittany Griner, if you don't know, was arrested, was booked, was charged with domestic abuse. She hit her former partner, who she's now divorced, separated from. You know, she's in a whole new relationship. God bless her, and much peace and love to her new relationship and her new family. But she still gets endorsements. She still gets to have her career, and without a whole lot of people bringing that up in interviews that she has, as opposed to Chris Brown, who had that same similarly situated cat, but he's a man, and he did this many years ago. And Chris Brown, except in the African American community, really doesn't have the kind of following that his talent should probably get him in terms of, you know, who he is. Pound for pound, Chris Brown is probably the most talented performer since Michael Jackson. And I'm a Prince fan. And saying that says a lot to me, and says a lot about me and the deference I give to him. But that one thing with Rihanna has haunted him and stopped him from making millions, and definitely has stopped him from being sort of a favorite of Hollywood and a favorite of the music industry. Just one example of the hypocrisy liberal media has in this instance. Let's go further.
Have limits on endorsements, performance opportunities, and things of that nature because of a mistake that they made nearly 20 years ago. She can explain that to her son and the benefits of being a woman presenting as a man versus what a man has to go through. Or let's say you get locked up abroad, you commit a crime overseas, and your country has to come get you and bring you back home. Okay, and Brittany Griner knows that when you come home, you'll be looked at as a hero instead of somebody who thought laws didn't apply to them. But she could also tell her son about how if she was a man, she would come back and her basketball career would change so much that everybody would look at you as the failure of the family who didn't make it to the heights that you were supposed to because of the stupid thing that you did overseas, right?
I think there's probably.
So again, comparing Brittany Griner to having pot, breaking laws within Russia, and one of the Ball sons, right? The three sons that were destined to be stars in the NBA, and the youngest one sort of not being able to maximize his career because of a mistake he made overseas. And basically having his NBA career never come to fruition. Don't think it was a talent issue, but because he made a mistake. But Brittany Griner was able to make the same mistake, same kind of similarly situated kind of thing, and was able to come back, and we don't really hear about it. In fact, she was swapped with someone who actually was maniacal because it's important to get our folks back home. And I'm not disputing that. I'm saying I'm glad she's home. Don't think she should have been arrested. Don't think she should have been contained. Think it was all political to try to get back somebody in a trade. But it did happen. Her career goes on. One other career does not.
One other job that you're about to get into that is really hard and really scary. You're about to be a mom. How is that feeling? Pops. Oh, let me get it together.
Even the interviewer is setting Brittany up to be viewed as a great father by saying this is Brittany's first child. Well, if you know what I know, it's not Brittany's first child. Brittany was actually married before, and her previous wife decided to have twins. And the wife says that Brittany handpicked the donor, picked a blonde-haired, blue-eyed donor. Probably, I don't know, so the children would look more like Brittany. So now there's 2 kids who are being raised by a woman. These kids don't look like her. They actually look more like Brittany Griner, that Brittany Griner doesn't even claim. And instead is being praised in this moment for the opportunity to be the father of the year. Can you imagine that? If it was a man, I'm telling you, it would. People would love to bring it up. Let's say you were a man, right? And you were previously married and you left that family, right? And then you went on to raise one of the greatest athletes of all time and change the culture of a sport. And they revered you so much that they made a movie about you, and that movie went on to win an Oscar. People would still do think pieces about how you left your previous family. And some people would even say you don't deserve a movie because of how you left your previous family. I've waited. Brittany Griner did that interview. I haven't heard one mention about her leaving her ex-wife with twins. See, Brittany can teach her son about how you can do stuff like that, or you can abandon children because you don't want any dealings with their mother. And not.
So again, another point that Ryan's making, similarly situated, right? Brittany Griner, married, has 2 kids by her ex, obviously because of domestic abuse and whatever, they've separated, and does not pay child support, does not see the kids, has nothing to do with that family, has a whole new family, and is never asked about it, is never questioned about it, never have her morality and her character challenged as a result of that. But we look at the Venus and Serena and their father, and they're successful, and they get to heights, and people always bring up the fact, well, he left that family, has nothing to do with them, and this is the only family he has. Again, not saying it's good or bad, just talking about the dichotomy and the coverage of liberal media who wants to villainize certain people but uphold others without holding them to the same standard.
Not be looked at as a deadbeat father because you're a female pops. And she can teach her son that there are real consequences for doing that. You know, I think she's going to be a great dad. Great dad. What y'all think? A lot of men are...
So that's what I want to end with. Is we're going to be doing things like that throughout our coverage and throughout our lives. Every now and then, just think pieces. I'd love to hear you all talk about that and tell me what you think about it going forward. Last thing we're going to end with tonight is my commentary, my way, just my own sort of editorial thoughts about situations. So I want to talk about what to expect, in all seriousness, 336 hours before Election Day. Essentially what's going to happen 2 weeks before Election Day. And that's something we don't talk about because as we talk about how both camps are balkanized in a way that is unprecedented, calcified in a way that is unprecedented, and cocoons in a way that is unprecedented in American national history, I get worried. And I know we laugh and we joke here, we poke fun, but there's an urgency that I think the attempted assassination of Donald Trump just kind of really put in the front of our minds in ways that maybe we didn't think about before. I think we're going to see a lot more fake news and AI memes and pictures than we have ever seen. You start to see some of that already, but as both sides feel maybe the election is slipping away from them, I think you'll see a lot of that starting to happen even more. I don't like being a prognosticator like this, but I think there'll be more far right and more far right extremist acts, large and small, everything from marches and demonstrations to Secret Service incidences for both sides, for both candidates. I think you're going to see a lot of court challenges based on early voting patterns and poll incidences. I think as early voting starts, and I think if it's a heavy Democrat voting pattern, I think these integrity people that the GOP are spending lots of money in are going to start challenging the vote, saying that, you know, the election needs to be postponed or certain things need to happen to suppress votes. I think the same thing may happen on the left in certain high Republican districts, that they will start going to court and trying to push back on early voting. And I think you'll see a lot of court challenges happening 2 weeks before, if not earlier. I think you're going to see a lot of legal challenges, preparations on both sides to dispute the election results earlier than you saw in even 2000. You know, if you go back to the 2000 election between Al Gore and George W. Bush, and you saw right after the vote was over with, you watched any documentaries about, or even the nonfiction story about, you know, they legal teamed up both sides to go fight this in the courts to try and get the advantage in terms of who would win Florida, the deciding electoral vote state that decided the election. I think you're going to see a lot of legal challenge preparations on both sides, preparing to dispute the election results. The Democrats will do that if Donald Trump wins. I think the GOP will definitely do that if Harris Waltz wins. And I just want to let you know, you heard it here first. I obviously don't want these things to happen. God knows I would pray that none of this would happen. But I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to get there sooner than any of us actually want to believe will actually happen. Strap in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But I still believe in democracy. I still believe in our system of government. And as you hear me say often on my content here, our founders, as deeply flawed men as they were, slave owners, people who thought women were second-class citizens, that black people were 3/5 of a human, that people even who didn't own land should not vote. They created a system of checks and balances, this democratic republic that we have, that as a system would allow changes to happen fundamentally that they didn't have the courage to do themselves. They instilled and presented an opportunity for future generations to do. And likewise, they created a system of checks and balances that is not always perfect. And there have been egregious violations of them. But they created a system of amendments, a system of checks, a system of that allows those profiles of courage to stand up in critical times to defend this system and to prevail upon it on behalf of the citizens of this great country of ours. And I just got to believe it will happen again. One final thought before I leave you tonight from Neil Strauss. The reason facts don't change most people's opinions is because most people don't use facts to form their opinions. They use their opinions to form their facts. Thank you all for rocking with me. Please subscribe, like, and comment below. Please make sure you hit the notification bell to let you know when we go live. We go live here on YouTube every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for rocking with your boy. Remember to spread the word. We're building as we fly. We're trying to get more, personable. We're trying to get more fancy with our stuff here. Trying to give you the bells and whistles that we think you'll enjoy. And we'll continue to have us rocking with you. And thank you for spending your time with us. As we leave you, as we always say, before we hit the road, stay curious. Remember, think. It ain't illegal yet. And I'm out.